The following program is brought to you by Jack Miller.
It's Down to Business with Jack Miller. Forget what they teach you in school. This is real life, not Wall Street, but Main Street. A real show on what's really involved with starting and running a business with all the ups and downs. Our guests will answer your questions and provide you with valuable information. Stay tuned and join in the conversation.
Thank you for joining us. We have with us a special guest, Chad Levy, who is an employment lawyer in South Florida. Chad, you on the phone? Are you with us?
I am, guys. Can you hear me okay?
Hey, we can hear you wonderful. How you doing, Chad?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Chad, I think you're an important guy to have on. I think with employees are the cornerstone of small business, and people know what they can and can't do in this lawsuit crazy world. So I'm really glad you're here. But before I start asking you a bunch of questions, and I think Todd has some questions, why don't you give out your contact information? Maybe spend just a minute or two. Tell us about your practice, what you do.
Yeah, we'll do the plug early. I like that, Jack.
I like that.
Chad Levy, we're in Fort Lauderdale. We do represent people up and down the state of Florida, so really not solely limited to this area, but we specialize in employment labor law, so anybody who's on both sides of the fence, either the employers who are trying to prevent getting sued or the employees who are having issues and basically need to try to do something about it, we help everybody. And we found that it's kind of a thriving practice going on right now because, like you said, a lot of people know what the laws are and are not and what they can take advantage of, and we try to help in any way we can.
So I have a bunch of questions, and maybe we'll just start off by I'll ask the questions. Todd will chime in, and it'll lead to a bunch of other things. And if feel free, Chad, to shut me up or go on. But first of all, what is an at-will employee? Because I think most people don't know what an at-will employee is.
And basically, almost everybody's an at-will employee. I mean, you got to look at it from this perspective. Unless you have a contract that's, like, let's take a baseball player, for example. He's got a 2-year contract. That guy's going to be getting paid for 2 years, whether he, plays a day or plays for 2 years. Most people don't have that. Most people don't have that kind of security. So as an at-will employee, you are completely at the mercy of the employer. They can fire you any which day they want, anytime they want, for any reason they want. And, the courts do it that way because they don't want to be tied up every day fighting about who got fired and for what reason and whether it was fair or not. So you got to have a really, really, lenient policy when it comes to at-will employees and basically let them employers do what they want to do.
So basically it means that if you don't do your job or for whatever reason an employer can you and let you go.
Yeah, and even if you do your job, it doesn't matter. They can come in and say they didn't like your, the hairstyle you wore that day. It doesn't make a difference. It could be any reason in the world.
So speaking of that, if somebody shows up for work and they are physically an appearance that doesn't represent my business, let's say, for example, I have a restaurant business and they have nothing against tattoos or earrings or nose rings or body piercing or whatever, but they look different than I want my business to represent. Can I get rid of them for that?
Well, basically, as long as you apply those policies across the board, that's the key. So, for example, if you have white guys who are tattooed and they're okay, wearing tattoos, and you have a black guy who's coming in again, who's tattooed all over the place, you can't treat the black guy differently than the white guy. So it's got to be basically across the board for everybody. But there are certain traits, for example, if you have dreadlocks, that's only basically an issue or something that's worn with black people. So black people, you can't say, well, we don't have, we have a policy where no dreadlocks are allowed, because that's clearly a policy targeting only black people. So it has to be something where you evaluate what it is that you're saying can't be done, and you got to apply it equally across the board to everybody.
You, Chad, have clearly never been to a Grateful Dead concert.
That's true. I definitely have not. What am I missing?
Well, plenty of white people have had dreadlocks, and do to this day.
But gotcha. So it has to be, in other words, you can't discriminate. It has to be equal in your view of it, of their appearance. That's
the only way you can do it. It's got to be equal across the board. And when you don't, that's when you run into trouble. And believe it or not, it happens. It's, 2015, you think that, minorities aren't treated any differently anymore, but it's amazing the stuff that goes on. It really is.
Same rule for the Tramp Stamp? A woman has a nice tattoo on her.
It depends on the job, I guess, it all depends on what kind of position. You guys were talking about the Hooters thing before. That's exactly, you guys hit it right in the head there. You can't, for Hooters, you got to be in a certain mold. You got to be the certain kind of appearance. They don't have to hire you if you're not within that appearance. It's for that kind of position. So, if it wasn't like that, I would just take, some 60-year-old guy, bring him in every Hooters restaurant, have him apply, have them not hire him, and then just sue him saying, they're discriminating because he's a man. So
let me get
this. Have some barriers within there that allow an employer to do what they want.
Let me get this straight. You listened to the first segment and you still decided to come on?
That's exactly.
You know what? I had my finger on the off button for a few times, but I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna do this, Jack. Here.
We were actually very good today. Last week we were talking about breasts and things like that. So
I was impressed by the 7-day quota thing there, but
I understand. Don't be impressed. I didn't meet the quota.
You let us down. You let everybody down.
Believe me, I let my wife down too. So I always wondered that because you go to certain restaurants and it seems like the hostesses, the front desk people, they're always beautiful females. And do they I guess they can only hire that if they set out and they say, "Oh, I only want a hot girl."
I mean, it if it's going to make a difference with the way the position works, and they're looking for this, appealing person when they come in the door, this young, attractive person when they come in the door, that believe it or not, that's allowed. I mean, it makes a difference, So you do have some leniency when you're an employer, but as long as it's, again, for the most part, equal across the board, so you're not just hiring pretty white girls. You'll hire a pretty black girl too. That's where you can get into trouble.
We allow pretty Asians and pretty Hispanics.
Yeah, you can get the Asians. Yeah. Everybody.
Okay, then I'm happy. There you go. Now, on to a serious thing. Only because Todd and I are very immature. Let's talk about sex and discrimination. I have a girl who works for me who I am tempted. This is not a real story. But let's say I have a girl who works for me who I'm tempted to, I don't want to say, make a sexual advance on. She's very hot. She dresses very provocatively. Once in a while at the file cabinet or the water cooler, our eyes lock and you know what I mean? It's awkward.
I hear you.
And I'm scared I'm going to cross that line. It would never happen to me, but I'm scared someone's going to cross that line. Am I allowed to get rid of her because she's too hot and too sexy?
That is one of the most interesting cases that's come out recently. Is basically an employer fired a girl, said she was too hot, and said, "Look, I'm going to sexually harass you if you're here. There's no way I can't. So I'm letting you go." And there was a question of whether or not that will be illegal, and the courts found that is perfectly allowed. He reacted before he did anything bad. Maybe it's not the best explanation for why you fire somebody, but it is allowed to be done, and it beats the alternative, which is harassing her and then getting sued and having all that fun stuff come out of the way. So I mean, that's the stuff that you just especially with text messaging and Facebook and all that stuff. I mean, people do the dumbest things, and I guess they're just not thinking the right way at that moment, but it helps us our cases when we have those. So.
Right. I think I read about that case. It was a dentist and his hygienist, right?
Yeah, you're 100% right. That's the one.
I mean, at some point, though, isn't he responsible for his hiring her in the first place? Maybe this whole thing was a ruse because he hit on her and she turned him down, and then he decided it was awkward at that point. I mean,
yeah, it's possible. It's possible. But you know what I noticed? Like I said, a lot of these cases, in the old, at least, 50s, 60s, all that stuff before this, so there's no evidence of this, sexual harassment going on. It's basically his word versus her word. And you just don't have that anymore. I mean, you have sexting photos, you have stuff. I mean, like I said, I had one where he was sexting photos of himself, and then he's like, "Oh, that wasn't me."
Well, he's just a schmuck. I mean, any guy, I hate to say it, there's a certain boundary, and anyone who, sexist pictures of themselves are just idiots.
Yeah.
I gotta hope the ones I do never come out. Right. No, I'm joking. No, or do that. Or, for example, I refuse to, I won't Facebook anyone who works for me or any business clients just because I feel it's like a boundary, you know? People need to learn that boundary.
It is a amazing thing that, like I said, when the male instinct sometimes takes over, you don't think about the repercussions, you don't think about the consequences, and then, when it does happen, someone has to answer for it, fortunately.
Are you allowed to fire the people on the spot at larger companies or mid-sized companies who hit reply all to emails that they shouldn't hit reply all to? Because I feel like that should be grounds for firing.
Yeah, you hear those stories all the time. I mean, that's just carelessness right there. Stupid. Don't do it. Just take your time. Make sure before you send anything out who you're sending it to, because, whether it's big size, small size, it doesn't matter. You do something like that, you then can, most likely.
But speaking of the notice, and seriously on this, I know we're joking around, but employment law is really critical. I'll try not to make too much of a circus of it. Got to make a little circus of it. But do you need to give somebody notice or warning before you're going to terminate them?
It all depends on what they do. I mean, realistically, look, what I tell everyone is documentation is the key to these cases. You know, you need to have good documentation. You need to have good policies in place. You got to make sure that everything, you know, if there's a complaint made, it's investigated and it's looked at, because that shows that you actually care about it. If you have someone coming in saying they're being discriminated against and you know, you don't do anything about it and then you just fire the person on the spot, you're going to get sued. That's just the way it is. But, you know, if you're having issues with someone and you write them up and you document it, and then you have to fire them for, you know, the continuation of that bad behavior, bad performance, you can explain it. You can justify it. So, you know, there is a benefit to doing the notice, but sometimes you don't have a choice. Like you said, sometimes you just have to do it based upon the conduct.
Do you find in today's day and age that you get a lot of cases based on the fact that women seem to be paid less than men for equal work and things like that?
No, you know, that stuff I really don't see a whole lot of, to be honest with you. I mean, it pops up every now and then when you're dealing with some higher level positions. You know, maybe when you're getting up with VPs or, you know, upper management kind of people, sometimes you do see some differences in pay. But for the most part, you know, with the everyday worker, you know, that stuff really doesn't seem to apply. What there is a lot of is old people. I mean, old people get the really bad end of the stick a lot, based on pay, based on schedule. It's just, you know, trying to force them out, get them to quit, bring in someone younger who probably will work for less and can do more. That's the way it is.
And what about unions and their sort of disappearance right now? Where does that put the worker in terms of their chances of winning cases or even bringing cases against larger companies?
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, there's not a lot of union activity out there. I mean, we really don't see it that often. When we do, for the most part, the union employee will usually not go with the union, would rather just go with a private attorney. So, I mean, I don't know if it's, like I said, what the actual reason is for it, but we've definitely noticed a very sharp decrease in unions across the board in all positions.
I think as a whole, they're just lower, becoming smaller and smaller and less relevant in the country.
Yeah, it does seem that way.
I wonder if they're even needed anymore, or just they line the union leaders' pockets.
You know what it is? There's so many now laws out there that it used to be it was your only way you could go up against your employer was going through a union. But you have a lot of protective laws out there. You know, there's a lot of lawyers out there who, you know, would do this to try to help an employee, and it's basically contingency based, so you don't pay anything out. So you don't need to go through the union anymore.
Gotcha.
You can have a private attorney. Much
you.
More beneficial for the employee a lot of times.
Chad, we got to take a hard traffic break. Stay with us, everyone. We have a lot more questions for Chad Levy, including, I promise, we'll try to make it a little bit of a circus and talk some more sex. Okay, everyone, we'll be back in 3 minutes. Thank you.
Don't turn that dial. We'll be right